Our breaking news just coming in to CNN right now. A federal judge in New York has just granted the U.S. Justice Department's request to unseal records from the investigation and criminal prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell, of course, was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein. The ruling opens the door for the department to publicly release evidence it had gathered against Maxwell. The trove of documents includes grand jury transcripts, financial records, travel documents, and notes from victim interviews obtained during the investigations. We're just getting Ellie Honig in to give us some legal analysis right now on this Justice Department decision to release a whole bunch of documents involving Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who was involved with Epstein, as all of us know. What's your sense? When are these documents going to be released, and how significant are they?
Well, so these are the grand jury materials that relate to the Justice Department through the Southern District of New York's prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell, which happened primarily in 2020. Now, DOJ had gone to this judge, Judge Paul Engelmeyer, before a few months ago and asked for permission to unseal the grand jury materials. At that time, the judge denied the request because grand jury materials are ordinarily supposed to be confidential. And the judge said, I don't see any compelling reason why we need to change that. Now, what has changed, however, is that Congress has passed and the president has signed this Epstein Files Transparency Act, which essentially overrides the normal concerns about grand jury confidentiality. So the judge today has said, well, in light of this law that's been passed, I now order that the grand jury materials should be released. Now, as to what's in them, we have a little bit of a clue, Wolf, because when Judge Engelmeyer denied the initial request a few months ago, he said essentially, there's really not much that's new in these files. Most of what's in the grand jury materials is already known to the public through the indictment of Ghislaine Maxwell, through her extensive trial, through the briefs that the parties submitted, through the evidence at the trial. So I don't think we should expect, based on that, to see anything brand new and shocking. But what we will see is what evidence did prosecutors put in front of the grand jury? What testimony did this FBI agent give around the case? It'll give us some more visibility into how the Maxwell case happened.
And I just want to be precise and correct. This was a federal judge who ordered the release of these documents, not the Justice Department. Ellie, is the Justice Department clearly going to obey what this federal judge has just ordered?
Oh, for sure. Yes. So prosecutors do not have the ability to release grand jury materials on their own. The process is, in the rare instance where a prosecutor, DOJ, is seeking to release grand jury materials, you have to go back to the judge and get special permission. The judge, Engelmeyer, has now ordered that, yes, DOJ, you can and must release those documents. DOJ has to. The law that was passed a few weeks ago requires DOJ to do this. The judge has now signed off. So everything is now in place. Those materials will be released. As to the when, Wolf, the law that was passed gave DOJ 30 days to release the Epstein materials. Day 30 is this coming Friday, which will be December 19th. So presumably DOJ, if they follow the law, will make at least the first bulk of those public disclosures a week and change from today. December 19th is sort of the key day to watch.
We have major legal developments tonight, and they look like this, and I'm going to walk you right through them. These are two separate cases where two judges have ruled for major Epstein transparency and basically changed what is longstanding precedent on what materials you release from criminal probes. I'm going to walk you through it here in plain English. The big development today is one of these cases, a judge granting a motion to release sensitive Epstein records, specifically to unseal what are grand jury records in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, that mirrors another ruling, and I'll tell you about that as well. But if this sounds like a huge change, it is. If you think back to every case you've ever looked into, maybe you're a true crime Whitey Bulger fan, maybe you remember the Mueller probe, grand jury materials are protected by Rule 6, which is one of those sort of long-standing rules of the federal court system. And the reason the grand jury materials are usually secret is because, unlike, say, an open trial where the government is presenting certain evidence, this is a private process designed to decide whether you get to trial or not. And for many reasons of fairness, say they don't indict and move forward, you don't just release everything they ever talked about. It could affect people's lives or careers. That's generally the baseline. But there is a new law in town. It's called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. You probably recall it because it was passed over the objections of Donald Trump all year. Then at the end, he claimed he was for it. He was forced into signing it. Republicans bucked him. And that law now requires the release of a ton of different types of Epstein material, colloquially referred to as the Epstein Files, this month by December 19th. So this new ruling responds to that law, and it comes just after another judge agreed in another case that also involves Epstein in Florida. Remember, there was that earlier Epstein case down there? So a Florida judge down there orders those Epstein grand jury records to also be released by the same logic. Now, this may sound like one of these legal weeds type things, but I want to point out a couple points on this with you. Number one, this is why the government, Congress, still has these vast powers. Sometimes we watch Congress and feel like they're not doing much or they're only fighting. But because of the push that we follow, the survivors, Ro Khanna, Republican Massey, and then winning over the objections of even the House Speaker, they passed this new law, the Epstein Transparency Act. And so, number one, new laws can change everything. Judges who literally last month were like, hey, you know we can't release grand jury materials. They're always secret. Today are saying, if you read the law, if you read the ruling, well, there's this new law and it says release everything, and this applies to everything. Number two, we've heard a lot about whether the Trump DOJ will try to play games or hold back materials. But I want to point something out. And maybe people who think everything Trump does is wrong will have to face some cognitive dissonance. But this is coming because the Trump DOJ asked to release the materials. This is not from some critical group or survivors class action lawsuit. This is Pam Bondi's DOJ, only under pressure, of course, as you know, but the pressure worked. Both these rulings will release new Epstein files and Maxwell files from previously secret grand jury materials because the DOJ was pushed into asking for it. That leads me to point three, which is everyone's watching to see if they play games going up to December 19th. On these grand jury materials, it would appear that rather than playing games, they're trying to get the files out. They invoke the new law and ask the judges to let them release it, and that's where we're headed. So that's pretty interesting because if they later play games, say if Pam Bondi says, oh, we're going to redact everything, well, look what you have. New rulings from these judges saying, no, you got to release this stuff because of the new law. So that would be bad for anyone trying to hide too much in the future. Now, one judge did criticize Bondi's DOJ, saying that while they paid lip service to Maxwell and Epstein's victims, they have not treated them, the victims, with the solicitude they deserve. Now, that's a point separate from the transparency I mentioned and refers to many past problems, which I'm not going to get into all right now, about why the judge says the DOJ has basically failed victims under Trump. Now, the House Oversight Committee also has been releasing those new images and videos from Epstein's island, and they say more material will come, including important bank records. Donald Trump has found this was an issue he could not spin or outrun, and his base remains interested in whether he complies with this law, which they know he was forced to sign. She calling out what she basically implies was Donald Trump aggrandizing or threatening. If he really thought people would get hurt by this and he really cared, he could have vetoed that bill. He could have fought it to the end. He seemed to more go with the wins when he saw that he'd lost. Now, everything I'm telling you is about how these cases work and how so far the pressure is working on the Trump DOJ to get more Epstein transparency. What is in the grand jury materials? Nobody knows. They're secret. I have seen some folks online, maybe they're just podcasters or not formal journalists or lawyers, and they've made claims about what's in there or that there's going to be big stuff in there. But the truth is they don't know either. So you should always be a little wary of people promising you details on something they haven't read or seen. Interestingly, the judge did tamp down expectations in one of these cases, saying the grand jury materials would actually not reveal new information of any consequence. That is striking, and whether that's true for both cases or why the judge thinks that or whether everyone will agree remains to be seen, but the deadline is coming.
This was going to happen. He is getting hit from every direction. The files are coming out. Things are still coming out from Congress. He's not getting bailed out. Donald is in trouble. The consensus has moved so quickly. It looked like maybe they were going to get away with it back in the spring. Remember, they said they were going to release the files, and then they weren't, and then the summer happened. And normally, I talked about this, right? Like, when you want to, neutralize a political scandal or any kind of scandal, even if you're in business, let's say, or a corporation and you have some kind of scandal, you drop news on a Friday afternoon, or ideally, say, before a long weekend, or before, like, a holiday break or what have you, right? So the story sort of peters out before people can even really start to pay attention to it. Because by Monday, people have moved on to other things. And Donald tried to do that with this, but not over the summer and then over a government shutdown. They literally spent months trying to bury this. Trying to bury it in the courts and trying to bury it in Congress and trying to bury it in your mind so you would forget. But I have one of the best audiences on this website. And I can tell you, you guys didn't forget. Even on unrelated videos, you'd be like, hey, any updates on the files and when they're coming out? And I said, well, not yet, but believe you me, we're going to keep on it. And we did, and you did, and millions of other people did. And that pressure forced everything, the legal system, Congress, everyone, to drop this information that Donald Trump has been fighting tooth and nail to hide. And he's only been trying to hide it because it makes him look evil.